A police officer and his loyal German shepherd were finishing their night patrol in the snowy streets of Denver when they saw her, a little girl standing outside the police station, shivering in the freezing wind. In her arms, she clutched a wrinkled letter and a soaked old teddy bear, her eyes full of a quiet desperation that no child should ever carry. She whispered, "Please, can someone read this for my mom?" That moment changed everything. What the officer discovered inside that letter would unravel secrets buried for years: a dying mother's truth, a child's courage, and a love that refused to fade. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments so we can see how far this story travels. And if you believe that hope can survive even in the coldest winter, hit that subscribe button, because this story will remind you that family isn't always found by blood, but by heart. Snow fell over Denver like a quiet confession that morning, soft and relentless, blanketing the city in white. The streets were nearly empty except for the steady hum of police cruisers cutting through the frostbitten dawn. Outside the Central Police Station, the American flag trembled weakly in the wind, its colors muted beneath a pale sky. The cold was the kind that bit through gloves and made every breath sting like glass. Inside the station, coffee steamed, phones rang, and the rhythm of duty continued, until a small figure appeared at the front steps, her boots sinking into the snow. The girl was about 7. Her name was Lila Thompson, though no one at the precinct knew that yet. She was tiny for her age, with tangled blonde hair that clung to her cheeks in damp curls, and eyes so blue they seemed to hold the reflection of the winter sky. Her pink coat was torn at the shoulder, its seams frayed and darkened with wet snow. In her arms, she carried 2 things: a wrinkled envelope, its edges smudged and soft from being held too long, and a teddy bear, soaked through and sagging, one button eye missing. The bear's fabric had once been golden brown, but now it was the weary color of ash. Lila's lips were pale and trembling, yet her small hands clutched her treasures with the fierce determination of someone who had come too far to turn back. At the reception desk sat Officer Carla Jennings, a heavy-set woman in her 40s with short gray hair and a face made kind by years of dealing with both criminals and frightened children. Carla noticed the girl immediately. No one could miss her against the whitewashed steps. She hurried to open the door. "Sweetheart, you shouldn't be out here alone," she said, crouching down, her breath forming clouds between them. Lila looked up, hesitant, her voice small but clear. "I'm looking for Officer Ryan Cooper," she said. "Please. My mom told me to find him. She said he'd know what to do." Carla frowned, recognizing the name. Ryan Cooper, 37, was one of the precinct's most respected detectives. He had served 15 years on the force, known for his unshakable discipline and a reputation for being cold as the weather outside. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair cropped short and a faint stubble that never quite went away, Ryan was the kind of man who carried the weight of duty in his posture. His gray-blue eyes rarely betrayed emotion, though those who knew him long enough said they'd seen something haunted there, the shadow of loss. 8 years ago, he'd been engaged to a nurse named Emily Thompson. Their love had been simple, bright, and genuine, until one night everything collapsed. A misunderstanding, a betrayal he thought unforgivable, and Emily disappeared from his life without a trace. Since then, Ryan had buried himself in work and built a wall no one could climb. Carla led the shivering girl inside, wrapping her in a blanket. "Stay." "Right here, sweetheart. I'll call Officer Cooper." Lila nodded, her small fingers still gripping the envelope. She didn't speak again. Upstairs, Ryan was leaning over a case file when his radio buzzed. "Detective Cooper," Carla's voice came through. "You'd better come down here. There's a little girl asking for you by name. Says her mother sent her." He frowned. "Her mother? What's her name?" Carla hesitated. "Emily. Emily Thompson." The sound of that name hit him like a blow. For a moment, the hum of the station faded, and all he could hear was the echo of his heartbeat. Emily? After all these years? He stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "I'm on my way," he said, and his voice was lower, rougher than usual. As he descended the stairs, a low bark echoed from the corridor, a sharp, familiar sound. Buddy, his 6-year-old German shepherd, padded toward him. The dog was a retired K-On, once Ryan's partner during years of narcotics operations. Buddy's fur was a rich blend of black and tan, his posture proud but eyes gentle, loyal to a fault. Ryan had kept him after the dog was injured in the line of duty, refusing to let him be put down as the department had suggested. Buddy followed him everywhere now, a quiet guardian whose instincts were often sharper than any human's. When Ryan reached the lobby, he saw her, the small girl sitting stiffly on the bench, wrapped in Carla's blanket, holding that bear and envelope as if her life depended on them. For a moment, he couldn't move. There was something eerily familiar about her, not just her eyes, though those blue irises felt like ghosts from a memory, but the way she tilted her head, the same way Emily used to when she was nervous. Carla gestured him over. "She says she has something for you." Ryan knelt down to the girl's level. His voice softened in a way it rarely did. "Hey there, kiddo. I'm Officer Cooper. You said your mom sent you?" Lila nodded, eyes wide. "She told me to give you this," she said, offering the letter with both hands. She said, "It's very, very important." He took the envelope gently. It was cold to the touch, the paper damp and fragile, the handwriting, neat but trembling, made his chest tighten. Emily Thompson. It couldn't be. His mind reeled. Was she alive? Why send a child, her child, here? "Where's your mom now?" he asked. Lila's gaze dropped to her boots. "She's sick, real sick. She said she didn't have time to come." Before Ryan could speak again, Buddy gave a sharp growl, his ears perking toward the glass doors. Outside, through the falling snow, a black sedan had stopped across the street. Its windows were tinted, the engine idling. Ryan's instincts flared. He rose to his feet, stepping closer to the window. But before he could see clearly, the car pulled away, tires screeching softly against the ice. "Something wrong?" Carla asked. Ryan shook his head. "Maybe nothing. Maybe something." Buddy was still growling, low and steady, eyes fixed on where the car had been. Ryan placed a calming hand on the dog's head, but the unease lingered. Across the street, from an alleyway, a camera lens glinted, unnoticed. Inside the precinct's second-floor window, Lauren Pierce watched everything. Lauren was 30, strikingly beautiful in a composed, deliberate way. Her chestnut hair was always perfectly styled, and her dark eyes missed nothing. She worked as a court liaison, sharp, ambitious, and accustomed to power. To her colleagues, she was confident and professional. To Ryan, she was his girlfriend, though even he sometimes sensed the steel beneath her charm. Few knew about her past, a childhood in foster care, years of being shuffled from home to home, learning early that survival meant control. It was that control she valued above all else. Now, watching Ryan kneel before the little girl, Lauren's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. "He's met the girl. The plan might fall apart. Stay quiet until I give the word." The reply came seconds later. "Understood." Downstairs, unaware of the web tightening around him, Ryan examined the letter. The ink had bled in places, as if mixed with tears. He felt his pulse quicken, but forced himself to stay calm. "Carla, could you get her some hot chocolate? She's freezing." As Carla led Lila toward the break room, Buddy followed, tail low, sniffing the air, uneasy. Ryan stood alone in the lobby, the letter in his hand. The snow outside thickened, pressing against the glass like silent witnesses. He hesitated for a long moment before breaking the seal. Inside were only 2 pages, written in Emily's familiar script. The first words hit him like a knife to the heart. "If you're reading this, it means I may not have much time left." He read the line again, his vision blurring slightly. The room felt smaller, colder. Buddy whimpered softly beside him. Outside, another engine revved, brief, distant, before fading into the storm. Ryan folded the letter, staring at it as if it might change the past. 1,000 questions surged through him. Why now? Why send this child? What truth could Emily possibly want him to know after 8 years of silence? And why, as the storm howled outside, did he suddenly feel like someone was watching them? Buddy's ears perked again. A low growl rumbled from his throat. Ryan turned toward the door, scanning the swirling snow, but all he saw was white. Then, faintly, a shadow moved at the far end of the street, disappearing behind a lamppost. He stepped forward, but the sound of tires spinning on ice told him he was too late. He exhaled slowly, gripping the letter. His heart pounded in his chest. Inside, Lila was sipping her hot chocolate, Buddy still restless, and the faint hum of the city faded beneath the wind. As Ryan unfolded, the second page, the ink was smudged, words trembling under his thumb. There's something you need to know about Lila before it's too late. Buddy let out a sharp bark, as if sensing what the words carried. Truth, pain, and a storm yet to come. Ryan read the first full sentence aloud under his breath. If you're reading this, you must know. I'm dying. The sound of a car engine roared again outside. Closer this time, Buddy growled, his hackles rising. Ryan looked toward the window, just in time to see headlights cut through the snow like twin knives before disappearing down the road. He clenched the letter in his gloved hand. What the hell is going on, Emily? He whispered. Buddy barked again, a warning, low and certain. And then, as if the storm itself had been holding its breath, the power flickered once and went out. Only the sound of the wind remained, carrying with it the faint echo of a woman's voice, or maybe just memory, whispering from somewhere deep in the past. The next morning came gray and brittle, as though the city itself had forgotten how to breathe. Snow still lay heavy on the streets of Denver, the plows struggling to carve narrow paths through the frozen quiet. Detective Ryan Cooper hadn't slept. The letter from Emily lay on his kitchen table, its creased pages spread open beside a half-empty cup of cold coffee. Buddy, his German shepherd, lay at his feet, alert even in rest, occasionally lifting his head, as if sensing the weight that pressed on his owner's mind. The letter had given an address, Aurora, East 14th Avenue, apartment 3B. Ryan knew the neighborhood well, a stretch of aging brick buildings and flickering street lamps, where the city's forgotten seemed to gather. It was the kind of place people went when they wanted to disappear. He hadn't heard Emily's name in 8 years, and now, suddenly, she was calling him back to the very place where their love had first begun and ended. As he drove through the half-frozen streets, Buddy sat upright in the passenger seat, ears perked, eyes focused ahead. Ryan glanced at him. "You feel it too, don't you?" he murmured. Buddy gave a soft whine, a low sound of understanding. The apartment complex was as bleak as the letter had promised. Faded red brick, peeling paint, and a flickering porch light that buzzed against the morning cold. The building manager, an elderly man named Harold Green, met Ryan at the door. Harold was in his 70s, short and stooped, wearing an oversized coat and a wool hat pulled down over his ears. His face was a map of old wrinkles, the kind that come from hard winters and harder years. "You hear from Miss Thompson?" he asked, voice gravelly from decades of cigarettes. "She don't get many visitors," Ryan nodded. "I'm a friend." Harold studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "3rd floor, end of the hall. She ain't been well. Sweet woman, though. Always says thank you, even when she can't catch her breath." He turned away, muttering something about rent and kindness being a dying thing. The hallway smelled of old paint and radiator heat. When Ryan reached the door of 3B, he hesitated before knocking. Buddy sat at his side, head tilted, waiting. From inside came the faint sound of coughing, deep, harsh, and ragged. Then a voice, weak but unmistakable. "Come in." Emily Thompson stood by the window, wrapped in a faded blue shawl. Her blonde hair was shorter now, thin from treatment, and her once bright eyes were tired but still held that soft warmth he remembered. She looked fragile, almost translucent against the pale morning light. Yet, When she smiled, the years between them seemed to fold away. "Ryan," she said, her voice trembling, "you came." He stepped inside slowly, his breath catching at the sight of her. "You didn't leave me much choice." She laughed weakly. "Still the same old officer, always pretending you're angry when you're just scared." Her apartment was small but clean, filled with traces of a life lived in quiet survival. Children's drawings taped to the fridge, a chipped mug on the table, a small heater humming in the corner. On the couch, a pile of blankets hinted at nights spent sleeping there instead of the bed. He took a deep breath. "The letter said you're sick." Emily nodded. "Lung cancer, stage 4. I didn't want to tell you like this, but I didn't have time for gentle words." He clenched his jaw. "You should have told me sooner." Her smile faded. "Would it have changed anything? You wouldn't have believed me back then. You didn't believe a lot of things." Ryan looked away, shame washing through him. 8 years ago, an argument, one he couldn't even fully remember now, had ended everything. He'd been angry, stubborn, convinced she'd betrayed him. In truth, he'd been terrified of losing control, the same fear that had cost him every good thing he'd ever had. "I don't want your pity," Emily said softly. "I just wanted you to know the truth before it's too late." He turned to her, brow furrowed. "The truth about what?" She looked toward the small bedroom door, where a child's laughter floated faintly through. "About Lila." The words hit harder than he expected. "Lila?" Emily nodded. "She's yours, Ryan. She always was." For a long time he didn't speak. The room seemed to shrink, the only sound Buddy's slow, steady breathing. I'm saying I never told you because I didn't think you'd stay. You were already half gone when I found out. Then everything happened. The lies, the letters that never reached you. And by the time I wanted to fix it, it was too late." He exhaled, sitting heavily on the chair. His mind was racing, trying to piece together the years that had vanished between them. "You're sure?" Emily smiled sadly. "Look at her eyes. They're yours." From the bedroom door, Lila peeked out, still in her pajamas, clutching her patched-up teddy bear. She looked at Ryan, recognition dawning slowly, like a memory she hadn't realized she carried. "You came," she whispered. Ryan's throat tightened. "Yeah, I came." Before he could say more, Buddy's head snapped toward the window. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Ryan followed his gaze. The curtain fluttered slightly, though the window was closed. He crossed the room and looked out. Nothing but the street below, lined with melting snow. Still, something felt wrong. He stepped out into the hallway. Buddy followed, muscles tense. Downstairs, the sound of a car engine flared, then faded fast. Only tire tracks remained in the slush. When he returned, Emily was sitting on the couch, her hand pressed to her chest. "Someone was there, wasn't there?" "Maybe," he said, "maybe just my imagination." But his instincts told him otherwise. Miles away, in a quiet downtown office, Lauren Pierce sat before her laptop, headphones on, listening to a recording. The faint sound of Emily's voice came through. "She's yours, Ryan. She always was." Lauren's jaw clenched. Her reflection stared back at her in the dark glass. Composed, flawless, unreadable. But behind that perfection, something darker stirred. She forwarded the recording to a private number, labeled only as RK. Minutes later, her phone buzzed with a reply. "Understood. I'll take care of it." The initials belonged to Robert Keller, a man in his early 40s with sharp brown eyes and a smile that never reached them. Once a rising name in real estate, Robert had fallen from grace after a scandal involving forged documents and missing funds. He dated Emily briefly years ago before she disappeared. Tall, expensively dressed even in ruin, Robert carried himself with the arrogance of someone who refused to admit defeat. Now, working quietly as a consultant for people like Lauren, he had found a new kind of business, the kind that thrived on silence. That evening, Emily went to check her mailbox and found a single sheet of paper slipped inside. The message was short, typed in bold letters. "Stop digging into the past. Not everyone wants it back." Her hands trembled as she folded the note and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't tell Ryan. Instead, she busied herself making tea, her movement slower than before. Lila hummed softly at the kitchen table, drawing Buddy on a piece of paper. The dog sat beside her, watching her every stroke with patient eyes. Ryan studied Emily from across the room, noticing the way she winced when she breathed, the way she hid the tremor in her hands. "You need treatment," he said quietly. "I can't afford it," she replied. "The insurance stopped covering the new medication months ago." He stood. "Then I'll cover it. You're going to the hospital tomorrow." She shook her head. "Ryan," he cut her off gently, "don't argue. You said you wanted Lila to have a father. Let me start by being one." For a moment, her eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from sadness. "You always did like fixing things that were already broken," she said softly. That night, after putting Lila to bed, Emily sat by the window, her breath fogging the glass. Across the street, she thought she saw someone standing by a car, a tall figure with a camera glinting in the dark. When she blinked, he was gone. In the next room, Lila whispered into her teddy bear, "Mom, I think he really is my dad." Emily smiled faintly, whispering back, "Maybe, sweetheart. Maybe he is." Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and soundless. The city lights shimmered through the flurries. Across town, Lauren stood beside her car, a cigarette between her fingers, the smoke curling into the frozen night. Her expression was calm, too calm. She exhaled slowly, the ember at the tip glowing like a warning light. "Let's see," she murmured, "how long she lasts this time." Then she dropped the cigarette into the snow and watched it hiss into silence. The week passed under a sky the color of lead. Denver's streets were slick with half-melted snow, the city's rhythm slow and subdued. At dawn, Detective Ryan Cooper parked his car outside Denver Health Oncology Center, a sprawling complex of glass and steel that rose from the frost like a modern cathedral. Inside, the faint scent of antiseptic mixed with the hum of machines and murmured prayers, a place where hope and despair lived side by side. Emily walked beside him, bundled in her pale blue coat, her step small and uneven. The color had returned slightly to her cheeks thanks to the medication Ryan insisted she take, but her eyes still carried that fragile shimmer of someone living on borrowed time. Lila held her mother's hand tightly, her pink scarf trailing in the wind. Buddy trotted beside them, his thick fur dusted with snowflakes, his breath forming soft clouds in the freezing air. A nurse at the entrance stopped and smiled as she saw the dog. "Well, aren't you a handsome guardian?" she said warmly. "What's his name?" "Buddy," Lila said proudly. "He helps me be brave." The nurse chuckled. "Then Buddy's always welcome here." They entered through the main doors, where light filtered in through tall windows, painting the marble floor gold. Patients in wheelchairs lined the hallway, volunteers offering them tea and soft blankets. In that quiet space, Buddy seemed to change the air itself. Heads turned, and people smiled, even those who had forgotten how. A boy with a bandaged arm reached out timidly, and Buddy leaned his head against the child's knee. A nurse whispered, "Guardian dog," and the nickname spread through the ward before noon. Ryan led Emily and Lila to the genetics department on the 3rd floor. The DNA diagnostics lab smelled faintly of ethanol and latex gloves. A young technician named Dr. Ava Lee greeted them. Ava was in her late 20s, Korean-American, with round glasses and an air of careful precision. She was the kind of person who measured twice before speaking once. Intelligent, detail-oriented, yet gentle with nervous patience. "I'll need a small blood sample from both of you," she explained to Ryan and Lila, her voice soft and reassuring. "It'll be quick, I promise." Lila looked nervous, clutching her teddy bear. Buddy nudged her hand, and she smiled faintly. "Okay," she whispered. "I'm brave like Buddy." Ryan sat beside her, rolling up his sleeve. "See? Nothing to it," he said, trying to sound lighter than he felt. But his chest was tight. The test meant everything. It was the line between truth and hope, between the man he had been and the father he might become. Emily watched silently from the corner, her hands twisting in her lap. She looked older than her 32 years, the soft lines around her mouth deepened by worry. There was something in her expression, not fear, but resignation, as if she already expected heartbreak. After the samples were taken, Ava promised results in a few days. Ryan thanked her, his tone polite but distant, and guided Emily and Lila to the hospital cafe. They sat by the window, watching snow begin to fall again, thin and hesitant. Lila sipped her hot chocolate, Buddy resting his head on her lap. For a fleeting moment, the world felt almost normal. Ryan found himself laughing, a rare sound, rough from disuse. Emily looked at him and smiled. "I'd forgotten that sound," she said softly. He met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "Maybe it's time we both remembered." That afternoon, as they left the hospital, Ryan slipped an arm around Emily when she stumbled. It felt natural, like muscle memory. But in the distance across the parking lot, a car idled. Dark windows, familiar shape. Inside sat Lauren Pierce, her gloved hands resting on the steering wheel. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were fixed on them. She watched Ryan help Emily into the car, his hand brushing hers. That single touch ignited something cold and sharp in Lauren's chest. She whispered to herself, "You really think you can erase me that easily?" Later that evening, Lauren appeared at the hospital, perfectly composed. Her long burgundy coat gleamed under the fluorescent lights. She carried a small bouquet of lilies, too pristine, too calculated. The receptionist looked up as she entered. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "I'm here to see Detective Ryan Cooper," she said sweetly. "I heard he was visiting someone." By the time she reached the ward, Emily was dozing on the couch beside Lila, who was drawing Buddy on a piece of paper. Lauren's heels clicked sharply on the tile floor. The sound woke Emily. When she looked up, confusion flickered across her face. "You must be Emily," Lauren said, voice smooth as silk. "I'm a colleague of Ryan's." Emily sat up, pulling her shawl tighter. "Oh, I see." Lauren placed the lilies on the bedside table. "He talks about you, you know, said you were an important part of his past." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I just wanted to wish you well." Emily forced a polite nod. "That's kind of you." Lauren lingered for a moment, her gaze sliding to the sleeping Lila, then to the open file on the counter. The DNA test order slip. She smiled faintly. Tests can be such funny things, can't they? One small error, and everything changes. Before Emily could respond, Lauren turned and walked away, her perfume lingering like smoke. 2 days later, the call came. Ryan stood in his office, phone pressed to his ear. "Detective Cooper," said the voice on the other end, Dr. Ava Lees, tight with discomfort. "We have the DNA results. I'm sorry. It's negative. The child isn't biologically related to you." For a moment, everything went still. Ryan's grip tightened around the phone. "Are you sure? I double-checked the data myself," Ava said softly. "There's no mistake." He hung up without another word. Buddy, lying under the desk, lifted his head and whimpered, as if sensing the blow. When Ryan told Emily, she went pale. "That can't be," she whispered. "There must be some mix-up." "There isn't," he said flatly, though his voice cracked at the edges. "The results are clear." Lila stood between them, holding her teddy bear. Her voice trembled. "So, you're not my dad?" Ryan froze. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Emily fell to her knees and gathered Lila into her arms, both of them crying. Buddy pressed close to them, whining softly. That night, Ryan sat alone at home, the letter from Emily beside him once again. Buddy paced the floor, restless. He kept returning to the cabinet where Ryan had stored the sealed DNA samples. Then suddenly, he began to scratch and bark, loud and insistent. Ryan frowned, opening the drawer, and froze. The evidence bag that had held the original samples was torn. The seal was broken. "Buddy," he whispered, realization dawning. Someone had tampered with the test. He immediately grabbed his phone and called Dr. Michael Reed, his oldest friend and a forensic specialist at the Denver Crime Lab. Michael was 38, tall and lean, with a perpetually tired look and a dry sense of humor. Years of late nights and failed marriages had left him skeptical but loyal to a fault. "Mike, I need a favor," Ryan said. "I think someone switched DNA samples at the hospital." "Jesus, Ryan," Michael replied. "That's serious. You got proof?" "Not yet, but I've got a feeling." "Bring me what you have tomorrow morning," Michael said. "And Ryan, be careful. You're stepping into something ugly." Ryan hung up, turning to Buddy. The dog was still standing guard by the drawer, ears pricked, ready for anything. "Good boy," Ryan said quietly, crouching beside him. "You always know first, don't you?" Buddy barked once, low, certain. Across town, Lauren stood by her window, phone pressed to her ear. Snow drifted lazily outside. "It's done," she said, voice calm. "He believes the test." The voice on the other end, Robert Keller's, responded coolly. "Good. What's next?" Lauren smiled faintly, eyes glittering in the dark. "Next," she said, lighting another cigarette, "we make sure she never leaves Denver alive." The flame flared, then died, swallowed by the falling snow. The storm had passed, but the sky still hung heavy with clouds. Denver was quiet that morning, too quiet, as Ryan drove north toward Boulder with Buddy sitting beside him in the passenger seat. The German Shepherd's shoulder was still bandaged from the scuffle 2 nights before, but he sat alert, eyes fixed on the road. The evidence bag lay between them, sealed tight this time, the real DNA samples he had collected himself after discovering the tampering. Ryan's hands tightened on the wheel. He couldn't afford another mistake, not now. The Boulder Independent Forensics Center was small but respected, the kind of place where truth still mattered more than politics. The head of the lab, Dr. Helen Grant, greeted him at the door. She was in her 50s, tall, with silver-streaked hair tied back in a neat bun, and the kind of sharp, unflinching eyes that seemed to see through lies. Her calm, measured voice carried authority born from decades of scientific precision. "Detective Cooper," she said, shaking his hand, "you said this was urgent." "It is," Ryan replied, handing her the sealed samples. "I need a full DNA comparison between these and the one submitted to Denver Health last week. Chain of custody has been compromised. I want results run twice. 2 techs, 2 machines." Helen nodded. "Understood. Give me 48 hours. He nodded, thanking her, then stepped back outside. The winter wind bit at his face as he knelt to check Buddy's bandage. The dog wagged his tail faintly, his eyes loyal and trusting. "Hang in there, pal," Ryan murmured. "We're getting close." Back in Denver, the city moved in its usual indifferent rhythm. Traffic lights blinking, coffee shops buzzing, people oblivious to the quiet war unfolding beneath the surface. At Denver Health, Emily was in recovery. The experimental treatment, a trial drug sponsored through Ryan's department, had begun to show promise. Her color had returned, her appetite improved. The doctors called it stabilization, but to Lila, it was a miracle. Every afternoon, Lila would sit beside her mother's bed, crayons spread across a small table, drawing their family, always 4 figures, a tall man with a badge, a woman with a scarf, a little girl, and a big dog. She'd titled it Our Happy Family. Buddy had become a minor celebrity in the ward. Nurses took turns bringing him treats, and patients smiled when he passed. The guardian dog, they still called him. His quiet watchfulness brought warmth where medicine couldn't. One afternoon, as Emily rested, Dr. Ava Lee stopped by. Her usual calm demeanor seemed troubled. She hesitated before speaking. "Emily, I shouldn't be saying this, but something about your DNA test never sat right with me. I ran a post-check on the log entries." Emily's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Ava lowered her voice. "The file access shows an unauthorized user, the Bauer. Night before the results were finalized, someone with external clearance. I've already reported it to the hospital board. She paused, glancing around. Be careful who you trust. Meanwhile, Lauren Pierce's perfect world was beginning to crack. She sat in her apartment, a sterile, immaculate space filled with expensive furniture that failed to hide its emptiness. On the wall, framed degrees and awards reminded her of the control she once had. But control was slipping. She hadn't heard from Robert Keller in 2 days. Her calls went unanswered. She knew Ryan was suspicious. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone she didn't recognize. A woman with tired eyes, red from lack of sleep. Love had turned to obsession long ago, and obsession had turned to fear. She poured herself a glass of wine but didn't drink it. Instead, she picked up her phone and called her contact inside the police department. "He's on to me," she whispered. "If he confirms the new results, I'm finished." On the other end, a cold voice replied, "Then finish it first." 2 days later, Ryan's phone rang. Dr. Helen Grant's voice was calm but firm. "Detective Cooper, I have your results. You might want to sit down." He was already sitting at his desk, Buddy beside him. "Tell me." "The child, Lila Thompson, is a 99.98% biological match. There's no doubt. She's your daughter." Ryan closed his eyes, exhaling shakily. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest eased. "Thank you, doctor." Helen hesitated. "There's something else. The tampering at Denver Health wasn't just internal error. Someone used a copied sample and altered the data logs. That kind of access doesn't happen without help." "I know who," Ryan said quietly. That night, Lauren came home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Her heels clicked nervously on the floor as she stepped inside. "Ryan?" she called. No answer. The living room was dimly lit, the blinds half drawn. When she turned the corner, he was there, standing by the window, a folder in his hand. She froze. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you have been in that lab," he said, his voice low. He tossed the folder onto the table. The true DNA results. "It's over, Lauren." Her face paled, then hardened. "You don't understand," she said. "I did it for you, for us. She ruined you once. She was going to do it again. I couldn't let her." "You forged evidence, manipulated a hospital database, and lied to me for years," Ryan said. "That's not love. That's control." Lauren's eyes glistened, but not from guilt. "You think you're some hero, Ryan? You don't know what it's like to lose everything. To watch the person you love look through you like you're a stranger." "I do," he said quietly, "because you made Emily live that." She stepped closer, voice trembling now. "I never meant to hurt the girl. I just wanted to keep you." Ryan shook his head. "You lost me the moment you touched that file." He reached for his phone. "You're coming with me to internal affairs. Now!" Something in her snapped. Her hand darted into her purse, pulling out a small silver pistol. "Don't make me do this," she hissed. Before Ryan could react, Buddy growled, low, primal. The dog lunged just as Lauren fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the apartment. Ryan hit the floor, Buddy tackling Lauren to the ground. The bullet grazed the dog's shoulder, a shallow wound, but enough to draw blood. Ryan scrambled up, disarming her with practiced precision, pinning her against the wall. The pistol clattered to the floor. Lauren's eyes were wild, desperate now. "You can't take her from me!" Ryan snapped the handcuffs onto her wrists. "You took everything from yourself." Buddy limped to Ryan's side, panting heavily. Ryan knelt, running a trembling hand through the dog's fur. "Good boy," he whispered. "You saved me again." Later, the police escorted Lauren out in silence. Her perfect composure was gone. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. She passed Buddy on the way out. The dog growled softly, and for once she looked afraid. The next morning, Ryan brought the real test results to Emily's hospital room. She was sitting up, color in her face again. Lila was asleep in the chair beside her, clutching her teddy bear. Buddy lay at her feet, freshly bandaged. Ryan handed her the envelope. "It's real this time." Emily opened it, her hands trembling. When she read the result, tears filled her eyes. "I knew it," she whispered. "I always knew." He smiled faintly. "I should have believed you." She shook her head, reaching out to touch his hand. "You're here now. That's all that matters." Buddy lifted his head, watching as Lila stirred awake. The girl blinked sleepily, then smiled when she saw Ryan. "Morning, Daddy," she murmured, and for the first time, the word felt right. In another part of Denver, police arrested Robert Keller. Evidence from Lauren's phone tied him to falsified medical files and corporate extortion. When questioned, he smirked. "I just did what she paid me to. Love makes people stupid." Back at the hospital, Lila and Buddy finished their drawing. Our happy family. Emily laughed softly as she watched them. "I think you're missing something," she teased. Lila added one more detail, a small heart over the four of them. "Now it's perfect." That evening, the sun broke through for the first time in weeks. Ryan stood at the window holding the lab report, watching Emily and Lila playing with Buddy in the courtyard below. He smiled. "This," he whispered, "this is the truth." Buddy barked once, tail wagging as if to agree. Spring came softly to Denver, as if afraid to disturb the peace that had finally returned. The snow had melted into silver streams running along the sidewalks. The air smelled faintly of pine and rain, and Sloan's Lake glistened under the morning sun. 3 months had passed since the chaos. 3 months of healing, laughter, and the quiet rebuilding of a family once broken. Emily Thompson sat on the porch of their small house near the edge of the lake, sunlight spilling through her hair. She looked healthier now, her skin warm with color, her blonde hair growing thicker, her smile no longer shadowed by fear. The doctors had called it a miracle, though Emily liked to think it was something simpler, love, and a bit of stubborn hope. Inside, Ryan Cooper was trying to fix a squeaky cabinet hinge while pretending not to watch her through the window. He still wore the same rugged denim jacket and old watch from his years on the force, but the lines around his eyes had softened. His gray-blue gaze, once cold with discipline, now carried something gentler, peace. Buddy, the ever-loyal German shepherd, sat beside him, tail thumping rhythmically against the floor. His wound had healed. Only a faint scar remained on his shoulder, like a badge of honor. "Not bad for an old soldier, huh?" Ryan said, scratching the dog behind the ear. Buddy barked once, as if in agreement. Lila's voice floated down the hallway. "Dad, Mom says we're going to be late for the ceremony." The word Dad still made Ryan pause every time he heard it, a small, beautiful shock that filled him with gratitude. He turned as Lila came running in, now a little taller, her hair tidier, wearing a pale yellow dress and holding her mended teddy bear, Mr. Buttons. "He's coming with us," she announced, hugging it tightly. "He's family too." Ryan smiled. "Then we'd better bring Buddy's leash. Can't have the best man wandering off." Later that afternoon, the four of them walked together through the blooming cherry trees surrounding Sloan's Lake. The city shimmered in the distance. But here everything felt still, a place suspended between sky and water. Emily carried a picnic basket. Lila skipped ahead with Buddy trotting loyally beside her, and Ryan followed with something small tucked into his pocket, a simple silver ring, polished smooth from years of waiting. They reached the spot where the grass met the lake, where ducks glided through the ripples. Lila spread a blanket, chattering about how she wanted their wedding to have pink balloons, a chocolate cake, and Buddy wearing a bow tie. Ryan chuckled, but said nothing. His heart was pounding harder than it had in any gunfight. Emily turned toward him, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You look nervous," she teased. He took a deep breath, then knelt before her. "Emily," he began, voice steady but filled with emotion, "I've spent 8 years chasing ghosts. Duty, regret, things I can't change. But somehow, you and Lila found me again. You brought me home." He reached into his pocket, revealing the ring. "I've lost too much time already. Let me spend the rest of it making it right." His voice softened. "Will you let me try?" For a moment, the world went silent except for the wind. Then Emily's eyes filled with tears. not the tears of pain that had once haunted her, but of joy. She nodded. Yes, Ryan, you already have. Lila squealed, clapping her hands. They're getting married! Buddy, you're the best man. The dog barked twice, tail wagging wildly. Ryan slipped the ring onto Emily's finger, plain silver, engraved with the words 8 years home. It wasn't expensive, but it was perfect. They embraced, laughter mixing with the sound of the lake. Nearby, an elderly couple paused to watch. The woman, Mrs. Hawkins, a retired schoolteacher with kind eyes and a floral hat, smiled at the scene. Her husband, a tall man in a tweed coat leaning on a cane, squeezed her hand. Reminds me of us, he whispered. She nodded. Maybe love really does circle back, no matter how far it goes. A week later, the Denver courthouse buzzed with the sound of reporters. The trial of Lauren Pierce had drawn local attention. The once respected court liaison now facing multiple charges: evidence falsification, unauthorized data breach, and attempted homicide. She sat in the defendant's chair, her once flawless hair pulled back harshly, her eyes hollow but defiant. When the judge pronounced her guilty, she didn't flinch. Only when the bailiff placed the cuffs on her wrists did something flicker across her face. Not remorse, but loss. Across the room, Ryan watched quietly. There was no triumph in his expression, only finality. Justice, he thought, wasn't about revenge. It was about peace. Robert Keller, clean-shaven and subdued, stood nearby with his lawyer. He had agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. I'm not proud of what I did, he said when Ryan passed him. She was persuasive, and I was stupid. Ryan stopped, met his gaze, and said, Start over. Everyone deserves one honest chance. Robert nodded, grateful. The following weekend, the Denver Police Department hosted a small outdoor ceremony. Officers in uniform stood in neat rows, and in the center, Buddy sat tall and proud, wearing a blue ribbon on his collar. Captain Morales, a broad-shouldered man with a booming laugh and a heart bigger than his badge, handed Ryan a medal in a velvet box. For bravery, loyalty, and service beyond duty, Morales said with a grin, then knelt to fasten a miniature medal to Buddy's collar. For our four-legged hero, the Guardian of Denver. The crowd applauded. Lila beamed, her eyes shining. He's a real hero, Daddy. Ryan smiled, ruffling her hair. He's always been one. That night, as twilight settled over the lake, Emily and Ryan tucked Lila into bed. She sat up, holding a piece of paper. I wrote something, she said, for the show Letters of Hope. They said kids can send stories about miracles. Emily sat beside her. What did you write, sweetheart? Lila handed her the letter, written in her careful, uneven handwriting. Dear Letters of Hope, my name is Lila, and I want to tell you about my miracle. Once my mom was very sick and we didn't have anyone. But then a man and a dog helped us. The man didn't know I was his daughter, but his heart did. And the dog, he saved us more than once. Sometimes angels don't have wings. Sometimes they bark. Love, Lila Cooper. Emily's voice caught as she finished reading. That's beautiful. Lila smiled sleepily. I'm going to send it tomorrow. When she drifted off to sleep, Ryan framed the letter and placed it beside the first one Emily had written months ago, the one that had started it all. 2 letters, side by side, telling one story of loss, love, and second chances. Outside, the night was calm. The moon shimmered over Sloan's Lake. Buddy lay near the window, eyes half closed but alert, ever the guardian. Ryan and Emily sat together on the porch, watching the reflection of the stars in the water. The air was cool, gentle, alive. Ryan slipped his arm around her shoulders. Hard to believe all this started with a letter, he said. Emily smiled, resting her head against him. Maybe miracles always start with something small. A letter, a promise, a bark. Down by their feet, Lila's old teddy bear lay between them, newly stitched, clean, its missing button eye replaced. The faint hum of the city faded, leaving only the quiet pulse of the lake, and the sound of Buddy's steady breathing. Ryan looked out at the horizon, where the sun would rise again soon, and whispered, "Miracles don't come from angels. They come from the courage of a little girl and the heart of a dog." Buddy raised his head, tail tapping softly against the wood, as if to agree. And somewhere in the house, between the two framed letters, a beam of moonlight fell, warm, gentle, eternal. Sometimes God's miracles don't come in flashes of light or voices from the sky. They come quietly, in the form of a letter carried by a trembling little girl, in the loyalty of a dog who never gives up, and in the heart of a man who learns that love can heal what time once broke. This story reminds us that faith is not about seeing, it's about believing even when life feels cold and lost. Just like Ryan, Emily, Lila, and Buddy, we all carry scars, but God turns those scars into signs of grace. Through pain, He teaches us compassion. Through loss, He reminds us of what truly matters: family, forgiveness, and courage. Maybe your miracle hasn't arrived yet, but it will, often through people or moments you least expect. All you need is to keep your heart open and your hope alive. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it so that others may remember that miracles still happen every day. Leave a comment below and tell us what you believe your miracle could be. And if you believe that God still works through love, faith, and loyal hearts like Buddy's, type amen in the comments. May God bless everyone who watches, believes, and shares His light through kindness. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of faith, love, and second chances. Because sometimes, what feels like an ending is just God's way of starting something beautiful again.